All right, we're live and we have football to talk about. I'm not going to lie. Maybe there's a time where this type of stuff could probably get a little bit exhausting, maybe around training camp. Maybe not for me, but for some people. But looking at the timeline today and seeing, guys running drills at half speed kind of had me ready for some football. Texans on the field, a lot of news to talk about. Davis Mills steals the show. Brooks Kubena, the great one of the Houston Chronicle, comes in the locker room now to break it all down.
Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah.
All right, so we had a little bit of football today, and we heard from CJ Stroud, the much anticipated press conference from CJ Stroud. If John McClain was number one on the list of frustrated media types when it came to not talking to CJ Stroud last week, I'll say Brooks Kubena was at least second or third. He joins us now. Brooks, was it everything you thought it'd be? And thank you for not making somewhat of a commotion about it. You brought it up and then asking a Travis Scott, Tom Brady question. I very much appreciate that. I gave John a hard time about that. I don't know what we were doing there.
Yeah, no, man, it was fighting for a question today with CJ. A lot of people wanted to, I mean, like, just getting him to be able to be available, that's kind of a behind the scenes thing. So, I mean, I talked a little bit on the show with the show and Clint, and just, we have our ways of talking to the PR department with the Texans, and there's a Pro Football Writers of America Association that we work on to get availabilities, and really in rookie camp, which was what that was all about, was that teams don't have to make anything available. You don't even have to watch practice. The Patriots don't, but looking at the other portions of the league, listening to Anthony Richardson and others people talk, but that's another story. Getting a chance to talk to CJ today, I mean, that's really what's important. Seeing them actually in some 11-on-11s, they can't really have any contact, but seeing how he's getting into this new scheme with Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson, which is really the biggest storyline going into this summer. I mean, they spent a number 2 overall pick on the guy. They've got 2 first-time, full-time play callers and quarterback coaches there. So really putting him into a situation where he's learning this new scheme is the most important thing that's going on with the Texans right now.
So do you think, I was talking about this earlier today, and the great Brooks Kubena here. It is a Locker Room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. Subscribe, download the Odyssey app. Subscribe to the damn Chronicle too. Good Lord. If you don't support the Chronicle, then you might be going to hell on scholarship, quite honestly.
Look, it's highway robbery right now too. 25 cents for 6 months, and
it's a steal.
I have my own opinions on that. I think it's a lot more worth than that. So
I would agree.
Appreciate the plug there.
All right, so I was talking about this today, and it kind of, the question kind of came across my mind when CJ was talking, and he said that Case Keenum was kind of a resource for him when it came to the offense because he'd known it before. And I guess if he wanted to lean on someone else, he could lean on Robert Woods. Do you think that coaches like an offensive coordinator, do you think they prefer to have be the utmost expert on the system because not as many people have run it? Or do you think they prefer bringing a quarterback in to say like a room where like 8 different guys have run the system? Because I think there could be pros and cons of both of those. How do you think a coach like a Bobby Slowick or DeMeco Ryans looks at that?
Right. Well, it's all about availability too, right? Who can you afford? Who's available? Who's willing to come to the team? All of those things go into it. And I think it's, there are little parts that are intangible also, like how do you be a pro? What's it like going from team to team? What are the expectations of the NFL? Like Case Keenum can cite that off better than most quarterbacks because of all the places he's been. So there's value certainly to that. He's also been a part of a lot of different offenses, and that's helpful there. But you have a quarterback in CJ Stroud who's making this transition from a spread offense. I'm not going to say that Case Keenum had the same transition. I think Ohio State's offense was a lot more pro style than perhaps given credit. A lot of run pass options, and they definitely had an emphasis on the run game that I think the Texans will also show. But Keenum obviously coming from a super spread with U of H and making that transition into the game. I think how CJ Stroud works into under center, the techniques, the little things that we could probably not get into the weeds on that Stroud's going through. And we saw him do that today. And I can see how he has a little bit more work to go, but I think there's that kind of value to it with when you add veterans like that and the situations with Robert Woods and all that. I think, coaches definitely like to have a blend. I think we can get all into the cliches of about whether what a player can expect and go into it. But Woods has played a bunch of different offenses too. You're going to have a blend of veterans and rookies anyway. I'm not trying to short sell the value of veterans, but CJ Stroud's going to have to figure this out on his own, bottom line, and it helps to have people around them. But I think the big thing here is you have a first-time play caller in Bobby Slowick and a first-time NFL quarterback here, and Gerard Johnson's been an assistant quarterbacks coach too, but they're all kind of learning together here, and just how they're able to create let's just call it a curriculum is really going to be interesting to me. And I don't think Robert Woods or Case Keenum or any of those guys are going to be a part of it. I would think it's more the senior offensive assistants. They brought two in, guys who have been quarterback coaches and offensive coordinators before. I think those have more to do with how to construct a system or at least being able to teach one than veteran players do.
What did you make of, and Jacob says he watched David Carr get ruined by playing too soon. If CJ isn't ready week one, then start Case or Mills. Let him start when he's ready. DeMeco said, though, he expects, and you better expect it given what you invested, he expects the offensive line to be one of the strengths of the team. What do you make of, we'll get into the possibility of CJ Stroud starting the season as the backup, but what do you make of just the surroundings for a rookie quarterback when it comes to the Texans?
Yeah, this isn't a scenario where the Texans are beginning their franchise and hope that Tony Baselli is going to be healthy and then maybe give David Carr a shot. This isn't the case. They have a multiple-time Pro Bowler in Laramie Tunsil who gave them an extension to. Titus Howard's been solid, and I just feel like Kenyon's Green going to make a better move this year. He has to. I mean, just missing training camp as he did and making that transition. Also, this is a different scheme on the offensive line too. A lot more zone blocking schemes and getting him into things that I think he's good at like giving him momentum in the run game and things like that. And Shaq Mason's been healthy and solid. So figuring out center, this is not a scenario like David Carr. I think that even gave them the confidence to go and draft CJ Stroud number 2 overall. And you've got 2 running backs, Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary, that are reliable, or plus, Dameon Pierce could be a Pro Bowl running back next year. He could have been Rookie of the Year if he had been healthy all year, maybe. So it's really the question about what the wide receiver core is. I don't think there's any concern. I mean, I thought it was interesting how big the conversation became that there's a quarterback competition now. I mean, what else is Davis Mills going to say when he gets up there? He's going to say, I'm competing for the starting job. And we know DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio are aligned on creating competition. What's going on here, and I was talking about this earlier today, remember whenever Kyle Allen and Davis Mills, they were going through the week and Lovie Smith wasn't saying who was going to be the starter, and they delayed it until later the week because of competition.
Competitive advantage. And then it got leaked out, and Pep Hamilton was up there, and yeah, that was a bleed show.
We knew that Davis Mills was going to come back. Like, he was going to be the quarterback, but they had already made Kyle Allen the change. They wanted to at least see for their eyes that, something might change. They drafted CJ Stroud with the intention of him playing in 2023, but they want to see him do it. And they also want to give him an intangible to, like, okay, you have worked your way up. What has CJ Stroud said all along? I don't want anything handed to me. So it makes sense. Davis Mills, in this situation too, he said it himself that the product on the field last year led to some of the decisions they made in the offseason. That's him too. Pick sixes, interceptions, all of that. He has something to prove too. So like if they didn't draft a quarterback, the narrative would be, does Davis Mills win his job back? So it's weird that it's, does CJ Stroud win this job? It seems pretty evident to me that the scenario is, you just got to see it from Stroud on the field, and the intentions are that he'll play. So it's not surprising. I don't think it's a big deal. He still saw the majority of the snaps, even though they weren't first team reps. That's going to be the case as they go through the OTAs, and it wouldn't be surprising to me that by the time mandatory minicamp comes around, that he's seeing the majority of these first team snaps. So he's got to work his way in.
Yeah, and I don't blame him for saying that. I just for me more so, it's, could that really happen? I mean, that's really how I start looking at it, because you hear people saying, well, Jimmy G started over Trey Lance, and there's like all these comparisons. I don't think that's a good comparison, because Jimmy G had system knowledge and Jimmy G had gone to a Super Bowl. So I don't think that's like a solid comparison. It just becomes like, well, could this really happen? Because we've seen guys start on the bench.
Right. Well, yeah, Jimmy G came into a scenario where the 49ers were terrible and they needed a quarterback and they traded for him. Then they ran off a bunch of wins, and he had done well with the Patriots. And that's not the Mills scenario at all. So they were confident in what they had in Jimmy Garoppolo, and what you've seen since proves that. So, and whenever Trey Lance was coming out of college, the idea with him too was that he was going to be someone that needed some work and some project to get in and work into the schemes. CJ Stroud doesn't have that attachment to him. Yeah, he's got to work into learning how to go under center, but people have done that before. The qualities that the Texans like about him, his precision, his decision making, his accuracy, all of those things are the things that Davis Mills struggled with last year. So there's a reason why they liked him. And if it turns out that Mills is more prepared and is actually leaning to be the starter week one, that then begs the question, what went wrong in the evaluation of CJ Stroud and the development of him across the summer? So it's not the same at all. I know I'm guilty of it too, to always look at the 49ers comparisons, because that's where Slowick and DeMeco Ryans comes from, and it's not a wrong way to look at things.
Yeah,
but
it's the only thing you have, but you gotta dissect it a little bit,
Right.
The other thing, I mean, Trey Lance, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. He was raw. Like, he started one game before they drafted him. I mean, it was a very raw pick. CJ Stroud is not that. Like, CJ Stroud is actually, I mean, polished, all that passer. It's not the same.
Could he be any more blue blood? I mean, two-time Heisman finalist out of Ohio State, and had 70% completion percentage. I mean, the guy, I don't know what else he could do. I mean, I remember, I'm not saying he's Joe Burrow or whatever, but like, we're talking about the programs, and like Nick Casero's always talked about how he likes competition at the NCAA level, people who know how to win. Stroud's done that. So like, all the players that he played against Georgia and whatever, people that he succeeded against, I don't know. He's prepared, and I'd be surprised if he's not showing advancement as he's going throughout the summer.
Great Brooks Kubena here from the Houston Chronicle. It is the locker room #1 source for Texans daily digital content. We're going to talk about one of my favorite things, Brooks. This makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, but when we start talking about OTAs, we start talking about rookie camp, there's always something that I want to get into when it comes to returning players. Body transformations. Last year, body transformations is my favorite topic, because last year you saw some guys put on weight. You get these guys, especially the second-year guys in the offseason program. Sometimes you don't even recognize them when they come in. Some guys come in out of shape. Some guys cut weight. What were the body transformations that stuck out the most? Was there anything? I heard Stingley might have put on some weight. Looked like Nico might have trimmed up a little bit. Nico was a little bit bigger last. Looks like he might have trimmed up a little bit.
Those two, I'd say Stingley's definitely. I noticed that myself. Nico,
and you followed him since he was in.
Yeah,
you covered him in college, so you've seen
he was a true freshman playing at LSU, and he was a bit lanky, and he had put on a significant amount of muscle by the time he got out of college there. And I mean, he's done that again. Nico Collins, to me, has always kind of seemed a bit lanky. I didn't really notice the difference there. I just really mostly noticed, hey, he's on the field and he's playing. That was really kind of my thing,
He's
seeing
a
the
camp
health.
hero
And
last
that
year,
was the
though.
thing with Stingley too, and just seeing how he was working. He was participating fully. The one person that really stuck out to me, I didn't really think about it with those two guys, but now looking back on it, that's what I was doing. But the one that I actually wrote down in my notebook, Dameon Pierce. I just
Those
noticed
legs look bigger,
the
man.
legs look
The
bigger.
legs look bigger.
He broke a lot of tackles last year, but the guy looks really strong. And seeing him in comparison to the rest of the running back group, so I didn't really realize Devin Singletary's frame. I knew he was 5'7", but like when compared to Dameon Pierce, I guess it just made him look even bigger. Maybe that's it. But he just him going through the pads, jumping, doing footwork drills. I'm talking to John McClain about the big run against the Jaguars last year. Of course, he brought up Earl Campbell, but everybody talks about Earl Campbell's legs, his thighs. Look, Dameon Pierce, he's got some tree trunks, man. He's going in there, and I would say that's the most noticeable body transformation for me. And he he could definitely, he looks really powerful.
Yeah, he looks big. What about his use? I've talked about this. It was kind of a, I don't want to say it's polarizing, but I threw out the possibility of him perhaps being a closer, like even perhaps being the backup when DeMeco throws out the committee thing. And that doesn't mean that you like lower the use. I just think it's very important to make a concerted effort to where he's fresh in the fourth quarter because he's the one that can take you home. And the guy that I compare him to is Marion Barber. They're like 1 inch off in height, but they're the same weight. They run the same. It's very violent. And Marion Barber, 06, 07, in that 2-year stretch, he had 24 touchdowns. He made a Pro Bowl, and he started 1 game. And he was still the best back. They just started with either whether it was Felix Jones or whoever, they started with him. Jamal Williams last year led the league in touchdowns, Pro Bowl caliber year, 17 touchdowns. He started 9 games. Mark Ingram with the Saints started 9 games in 2014 when he made the Pro Bowl. I think it's really important for them to, first of all, DeMeco said he wanted to use a committee. So we're not just making this up.
Right.
Like this isn't us saying, well, there might be a committee. He said it. So that's what he seems to want to do. I just think it's really important that Dameon Pierce is kind of the closer here. And he's the guy that kind of takes you home at the end. Because once the defense wears down, it's not easy to tackle that guy anytime. But when you're tired, it's got to be even more difficult, especially if he's fresh.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I know I said this earlier about making comparisons to the 49ers, but I'm going to have to dip into that again because I was looking at this earlier in the year and they traded for Christian McCaffrey, right? Big trade. Thought it would push them over the edge. Who knows what happened if all the quarterbacks didn't get hurt, but he only had 44% of their snaps over the year. Obviously, that had a little bit to do with how the offense ran and the availability of other running backs, but like you had McCaffrey, you had Jeff Wilson. Those were the kind of major guys. How does I wouldn't expect Dameon Pierce to obviously have like 70% of the snaps or that. I mean, you could see a scenario where I think Dameon Pierce is still the starter. I think he's still the guy that, if you trot him out there, you're going to get 4-5 yards per carry on first down, which is huge. But I think the usage here, it seems like when I'm talking to Davis Mills and even DeMeco Ryans and said a little bit about what the offense is going to look like. Just a lot of motions, a lot of quick passes, a lot of openings over the middle. That doesn't really speak Dameon Pierce from what I've seen last year. I mean, the conversation around him was always how is he going to develop as a receiver, and that's what Singletary comes in for, right? Like 200, 300 yards receiving for each year of the last 4 years with the Bills. I think that's where he fits into this mix. The question is, how obvious does that become? And Singletary himself, I think he averaged about 4 yards a carry too. So I think your Felix Jones comparison here is interesting. But I wonder how well this would go. You don't want to be in a situation either where, say, Dameon Pierce is doing really well for you, because somebody was talking about drafting, bringing in and drafting Bijan Robinson. Then you have the problem of 3 running backs. How much? I guess what I'm saying is, like, Dameon Pierce, you don't want to take away snaps from a guy that's going to possibly get you good gains either. So
Yeah.
it'd be curious to me how much they're willing to decrease his load on the team, because obviously he's a plus for them. So not a bad problem to have. I'm just curious how much they might overthink it.
It's also got to be kind of a feel thing. I don't think you can get you can't get too formulaic and robotic when it comes to, who's toting the rock, or at least you would hope not. People keep saying Mills' neck got bigger, and it did look a lot bigger at the podium, man. I used to
think
think
everybody just hadn't seen it in a while.
man, that neck looked pretty massive. Let's get into the Davis Mills. Are there any more body transformations?
Not that I noticed.
How Kenyon Green looks like he's lost some weight.
He wasn't there.
No, I'm talking about from the car dealership picture that came up. Have you seen that?
No, actually, I haven't.
Yeah, there's a picture of him buying a car. I think it's 2 weeks ago, and he's sitting with the guy. He has that usual look on his face, and it looks like he's trimmed up.
Okay.
Have you seen it? Look up Kenyon Green car.
I'm looking at it. I'm trying to find it. Kenyon Green.
Let me see if I can find it.
No, just a bunch of.
You haven't seen it?
Pictures of him at A&M. No, I haven't. But so I the thing with Kenyon Green is, so I talked with a few people the past couple of weeks about him, and
what do you make of the guys who weren't there?
So Kenyon Green missed. Earlier this offseason, he had arthroscopic knee surgery just to clear out some things in his knee. I heard that shouldn't be a big deal, but he also had a shoulder injury too, that might have played into him not being available this week too. I think that is probably notable just for how he's working through this, because we talked about training camp last year, missing that with the concussion. These are kind of crucial times too for him to get in there. So him not being there, I think, is important.
There you go. Look at that, man. It's trimmed up a little bit.
I don't know if is that a good thing?
I don't know. I just know it's trimmed up a little bit. I mean, it almost looks like a damn tight end.
Or is the car dealer guy just actually pretty big?
I don't know.
What is the comparison? We need a third guy.
And of course, Brown Chubby Bear is the one who dug this up. That psycho. But yeah, Kenyon Green right there. Got the finger pointing.
Now we're gonna break down hey, what's his sleeve? Is there less muscle going there?
Arms look skinny. Yeah.
What's going on with his wrist and his finger? Is there enough veinage from working out? I don't know. We'll see. But he's definitely I mean, it can't be understated. He was one of the first round picks that they picked up in the Deshaun Watson trade. Those are things that Cassari needed to cash in on, and especially at left guard, which is a crucial position for them. We saw the problems that they had in the interior rush last year. That's big to protect CJ Stroud. So him being there is important, whether it's OTAs running through 11 on 11, 7 on 7, or whatever. Landry Tunsil not being there, not so big a deal. I mean,
someone said, I hope the car dealer salesman is 275 pounds.
Just come in and that's what we need. Is he maybe he's an ex-football player who's in on it? What's that name tag say? Maybe we can look him up.
I think it says Tony Baselli.
Yeah, Tony. Then Kenyon Green is massive.
God.
But yeah, Landry Tunsil, he signs his contract.
He just handles his business. He just does his
business. He can do it away. You can show up on any day, and you know what you're going to get out of him. So the others that I thought were notable, Steven Nelson. He you know what you get out of him. He's been a longtime veteran. I have no indication.
You think he's pissed?
I don't think he's pissed. I know he's got a ranch out in Texas. He's probably just chilling
No,
out
but you
there.
think he's pissed that they brought in Shaq?
No, I don't think so.
That seems like something that he might motivate himself with.
Shaq Griffin wasn't there either.
Yeah, but they signed him.
Yeah, well,
Don't you think that would be? I mean, that's got to be. You try to hang on to everything, right?
maybe. I mean, maybe he just comes to work and he knows he's got a pretty good
So
contract.
who all was not there?
Guys that weren't there. So Denzel Perryman was one that I was looking for too, because they signed him, linebacker, to come in, compete against Christian Kirksey and others. He wasn't there. I have no indication that that's an injury based. There were some questions about that whenever they signed him. It's a long list, man. I actually have it right here. So let's just go: D'Angelo Ross, Garrett Wallow, Blake Cashman, Thomas Booker, Malik Collins, Hassan Ridgeway, Sheldon Rankins. I think the defensive tackles might be, out in Tahiti or something. I don't know what they
working
did.
out together.
They just all got
That's
on a
one
big
of them.
vacation and went out together. But that's another thing. Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins appear like they'd be the starting defensive tackles. But I'm sure DeMeco Ryans would like everyone to be there. But Amari Rogers, John Mechie, obviously he's going through the hamstring injury that he has. Rough for him the past year. Steven Sims, Dalton Schultz, that's another one. Another veteran that you know what you're getting out of. But in CJ Stroud's, I was working into the offense. That's a guy that you'd probably prefer to be there too. So one guy that I thought is interesting is Austin Deculus, 7th round pick, obviously or 6th round pick from last year. He's not going to be a starter. The reason I bring him up is because I think it's interesting when you think about the organization of the offensive line. He could be a swing tackle. His development into this is going to this could be the first time we start seeing draft picks not make the team. And one of the things, Charlie Heck is entering the last year of his contract, and I think they could pick up maybe $3 million or so if they cut him. So if Deculus progresses, that one signals Casario's personnel department's way of evaluating late round picks, but it also could save them some and give them a little flexibility there. So those are the guys that are missing. I'd say Denzel Perryman is probably the bigger one, just because you want to see what you have at linebacker, because there's so many questions there, probably the most questions on the defensive side of the ball. And then obviously you'd probably want to see what you had in the middle with those new defensive tackles.
All right, so let's get into the story of the day. Davis Mills competing for the starting spot. We kind of touched on it a little bit. Is Davis Mills, is he competing for the backup too? Like 3 quarterbacks, they're definitely going to keep 3 quarterbacks. I mean, you'd kind of be foolish not to. Do we think Davis Mills is just like the backup no matter what, in case Keenum's kind of just like the third guy and kind of somewhat of a resource?
Yeah, so this is what's interesting to me, is that we're entering a situation, 3rd year of the Caserio era, where you've seen them cut a lot of players during training camp. So not only Mills, but other players, are their position battles competitive enough with good players that you could actually call up a GM and say, hey, what do you think about this guy? And not, have the phone get hung up on you and say, we'll just wait for you to cut him. Is Mills looking into this scenario where he says, if I lose this job, do I want to play elsewhere and go compete somewhere? Or is it better for me to sit here and wait out the last 2 years of my contract? I could see a scenario where, he feels like he'd want to go compete somewhere else. I mean, he's been through a lot of offensive coordinators. He hasn't had much help offensively, and he might want a fresh start somewhere else. I mean, we brought this up, I think, the last time we were on this when we were talking about Mills. If a player had started with the Texans week 1 and was eventually benched, they did not return with the team the next year. Mills is under that. He'd be the first to come back with the team in that scenario. So I don't think it's a no matter what. I think they know that Keenum can come in, and you have confidence that he can go into a game and at least perform. I see, even if just with the NFL making its rule changes, that they can carry 3 quarterbacks. Yeah. I don't think it's a given that Mills is with the team come week 1.
No, I saw Aaron Wilson had to delete the tweet. He was trying to say Mills, but he said Stroud instead, that teams were interested in trading for Stroud. But he also said that teams were
I didn't
interested
see
in
that.
Mills, but he was unavailable. And
Well, right now.
who's interested in Mills right now? I mean, I'm not trying to question anything. I'm like, why would anyone be interested in Mills right now? And why would he be unavailable? Like, that seems like someone like telling someone something and then it just being said. I don't even know why that would make sense on either end. Like, are they going to hang up if you call about Davis Mills?
Well, right now they have a quarterback situation where they need to figure out and allow their room to teach each other and grow and build a competition for CJ Stroud as such as it is and go through it. It wouldn't behoove them to get rid of Mills right now. You'd get into a situation in training camp where you know how things are going to end up. Then you start fielding calls. It would be strange for them to deal Mills right now because then you'd be in the situation of picking up a third quarterback right now and who's available. So that's really more along those lines. So like who's interested in Mills? I'll say this about him. Like you saw progression with Tim Kelly in his rookie season with less than they had offensively last year. And I think there's
Oh
a
no,
lot
you're
to be
doing
said.
this. You're
No,
doing this. No.
I'm just giving a case for what people might see in Mills. You see a guy, and I think there's some justification for Tim Kelly. And I had written a lot towards the end of the year whenever they were debating whether to fire him. Was he had done about as much as he could do offensively, and then once he was fired, getting back now he's the offensive coordinator again with the Titans. I think there's some justification in that, and the Texans then going with Pep Hamilton to try and work things out with him. We saw the regression there. We saw not just him, but other parts of the offense go down. Brandon Cooks, his progression was down. Mills was, as highly rated a offensive player coming out of high school as anybody was, and he goes to Stanford. We can go into long weeds about what happened to him during the COVID year, but he decided to bet on himself and come out. If he had stayed, Kenny Pickett, the only first-round quarterback, he might have been a second. So there is talent there. He's been beat up. Someone mentioned David Carr earlier. I think it's not so hard to compare what Davis Mills has gone through the last couple of years too. And funny, I actually reached out to Carr through some media folks at the NFL Network to see if he'd be interested to do a comparison, and I didn't really get anything there. But I think there's probably somebody. Remember Gary Kubiak, whenever he got the job at the Texans, part of it was like, hey, I can fix David Carr. There's probably a lot of offensive coaches out there who are looking for their second, third, maybe an option there and saying, okay, he went through it. He's still young. There are a lot of things that we like about him. He's acted the right way through a lot of difficult scenarios, and he's a smart kid. So maybe I can be the one that fixes him. So we've seen that with other quarterbacks. It's worth a phone call. I don't think it's really out of the imagination that somebody would trade for him. Now we start getting into compensation. I'm not saying like they're going to get a third round pick.
Sixth.
Like, yeah, probably sixth. Probably
but a backup quarterback. Like if you think he's a good backup quarterback, then do you want to piss away a sixth?
Right. So you'd then be into the equation of, hey, is Keenum good enough for us here? Is in the situation that you're at. So like, yeah, I mean, you'd have to figure that out.
Here's the thing, and as we've had this discussion, and you and I agree on the dangers yet somewhat necessity of talking about San Francisco and trying to connect it back to DeMeco and Bobby Slowick, and you've got to balance that out. But the one thing I would say that I think could be something to look out for when it comes to perhaps like a lesson from San Francisco is you don't want to undervalue the third quarterback. Like if there's anything that they like, if you watched that NFC Championship game last year and you saw that they were basically putting Josh Johnson out there off of the street, the one thing that I could see DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Slowick taking a little more serious than a lot of teams may, because maybe if you're the Kansas City Chiefs or something, you just say, third quarterback, we're not worried about it. We got our top two. But I wonder if they feel a little bit differently about having a third quarterback than a lot of teams do, just because of what they went through and the painful experience they had to endure in that NFC Championship game.
I think it's a really rare case, and I would wonder if they're making decisions that could impact the future and the present in terms of how they spend their capital just on a really, really strange year. And that's also whenever you had Trey Lance, who had, dealt with injuries already. And here's the other thing. If you're balancing whether to trade or move Davis Mills for certain options, it would probably be on whatever you need at the time. But what I'm trying to say here is that Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant. It's not like they were super investing on their third, fourth quarterbacks. Gerard Johnson, like you said,
But I'm saying
Josh Johnson came off the
because they
street.
figured because the two
You would
went
think they
down,
would try to be
the three
better
went
than what
down.
they
Yeah,
had there.
yeah. Like
I mean,
maybe you don't want to put yourself in that
true,
type of situation.
but if you have the opportunity, I don't. Is a sixth round pick worth it? Maybe not.
Yeah,
If there's something better than that, maybe so. So, yeah, I think those are all things that you're probably balancing there because you got 2 more years on Mills' contract, so you could hold him and see what happens.
man. How is it like? Is Tank Dell? Does it seem like Brad Pitt is kind of walking into a restaurant on Hollywood Boulevard on TMZ? It seems like the local TV people are
Man.
pretty infatuated with old Tank Dell. He can't go anywhere.
No one asked about the local Case Keenum coming back. I don't know what happened with that. So,
They will.
never underestimate the power of the local kid, right?
Berman needs at least one Case Keenum press conference before he retires. If he
Yeah.
doesn't get at least one more interaction with Case Keenum, then we're doing ourselves a disservice.
What is it? July? What was his
July
date that he
12th.
said? July 12th? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I think he might be able to get that by then.
We have to.
I think I think with Tank Dell, there's even beyond the U of H part of it, there's definitely intrigue because not only wide receiver, but the slot receiver position has been such a turnstile the last couple of years. I think there have been 8 or 9 guys that have rotated that. I mean, God, there's been so many. I'm blanking on the Anthony Miller. Remember Anthony Miller?
Yeah, I was talking about him today.
That was the beginning of all of it.
Well, because
Like,
I
we
relived
traded for this guy and the injuries and
the
Danny Amendola and everything else.
I did today on the show. I did the history of the Texans on Thursday night, and I went through every Thursday night game. And Davis Mills' first start against Carolina, where they were down 7-0 in the first half, and he hit Anthony Miller for the touchdown, but then Fairbairn missed the extra point. I think they ended up losing the game 23-9. I think he got cut the next week.
He did.
It was at least a week or two. It was a week or two later. The Anthony Miller thing, which, by the way, not the most costly thing, but when you look at how that whole thing went down, that was pretty weird.
It was, and part of that I think was non-football as well, and that was part of the beginning of the setting the culture thing, and you had multiple people in the building at the time, and I mean it's just So going through, I mean that was God. Just thinking about the 21 season, so many things that happened there that would just. I mean, Danny Amendola coming in and being,
Remember when Nick Caserio called him a Texan for life?
Yeah,
that was the lowest of the low of Nick Caserio.
There's a lot of room up there on the
what is Rex Burkhead then?
Wall of Fame.
What is Rex Burkhead then?
Rex Burkhead? Yeah, you didn't say that about him.
Danny Amendola is a Texan for life. What is Rex Burkhead?
Rex had the Chargers game at least. So
Tyler remembers it.
Yeah,
the slot has been rough. Is that you got to feel a little bit decent about the slot. You got at least some upside. You got some stuff you can do there.
Well, the other person that I think might make sense there is Noah Brown. He played slot, I think the majority of it with the Cowboys, and I point him out because
he's my guy. That's my sleeper.
Last year was the first time he got more than 30% of snaps in a season. He went off for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is productive when you're considering the amount of players that were catching the ball with the Cowboys, including Dalton Schultz. So I don't think Dell's a shoe-in to be, seeing the most time on the field, especially when you're talking about body transformations. Tank Dell needs one. I mean, they have him at 5'10". He was measured at 5'8" at the combine. I don't know why there's such a blatant gap in the what's been on there. It's like I'm showing up to a college spring football game. But 165 may even be pushing it. But he's at 4.5. That was about what he ran to. Davis Mills talked about his quickness.
He said he has the most quickness he's ever seen.
I did see that. And what I did see that too is him, Robert Woods, Derek Stingley, others were returning punts. And Tank Dell was by far the most smooth at that. And you could see how quick he was in his breaks, how swiftly he went from catch to run. And he was making moves in 11-on-11s. And he caught a quick pass against Christian Kirksey and took off. So I
That's
don't know if
hard.
that's the measure
That's difficult.
there. I mean,
You
so
can do that.
we'll see. Dude, you saw me at the media combine. You know I can't do that.
Boy, y'all were trying really hard there.
Hey, you gotta come out whenever you know that DJ Bieniemy is like the Louisville track runner. I had to try to make my own as an 0-10 Clear Laker. So, but yeah, I think that's important. And Dell and Brown are going to be interesting in this cycle for the Texans. And I mean, Robert Woods, you mentioned him as a veteran earlier. We talked to him today about his transition in this offense. He said he chose the Texans specifically a little bit about slow scheme, which this is his first scheme. I'm guessing it just means what the 49ers ran and hopefully what they're about to do. I'm sure they chatted a little bit about it. But, Mills was thrown. We talked a lot about how he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. That's not necessarily always an issue whenever you can have separation over the middle that leads to a lot of yak yards. That's not what the Texans had either last year. Cooks was probably their quickest and fastest, and they were never able to get much separation with him. When we hardly saw many crossers over the middle that turned into long gains. I don't see this as a scenario where Stroud has to. That's why Stroud fits in a lot of this because of his ball placement, of how his timing is. When you factor in Schultz, Dell, Woods, guys that can be quick and get separation, that's kind of what you're wondering from Woods here, coming back in his second full season from his ACL. Those are the things that I wonder about this group, not necessarily about getting the ball deep, which you want to do, but it seems what the 49ers had done and what Sloak's bringing to the table and what they're talking about bringing motions in the backfield, and that screams Dell, that screams Singletary. How does that work? And is the check down that we've seen the last couple of years to Rex Burkhead and others that gains 1 yard or two and makes a nominal difference? What is it exactly the short game turning into with the Texans that can actually lead into larger gains? And that's really what I'm trying to see here from Tank Dell, which his quickness and his cuts, not only just getting separation, but getting past second level defenders after he catches the ball too.
How did Hutchinson look?
I didn't see him catch too much. I was looking around a lot. He did run with the Dell unit from CJ Stroud and others. I didn't see Nico Collins get too many catches in that either. I'm not saying that's an indictment against Collins or Hutchinson, but this is also the first week of OTAs, and a lot of checkdowns to running backs. Dell got a couple of passes too. I think Hutchinson might be in that more medium range like Collins is too, and that's probably why we didn't see much from them.
I feel like you and I might be it's like when you ask a U of H person about Tank Dell and you kind of have to grade on a curve based on the hype. Hutchinson looked like Jerry Rice to me when I saw him play last year. He looked like outside of that one drop. I think he's good. He looked good at the thing at the rookie mini camp I was at. He looks like he belongs. The only reason he fell was because of the workout. It's not like he's some guy who came out of nowhere. Like Oklahoma and Utah offered him to. So it's not like he's like some community college and went to Iowa State and all that. Like,
no, yeah.
I think he's good.
He's a first team all Big 12 guy who multiple times in an offensive conference. Are you bringing up Jerry Rice because he doesn't really have the breakout speed and measurements and all that stuff?
I'm bringing it up because he was just kicking Texas's ass, and he probably should have had 35 catches that game.
Well, it's funny because that's what I thought you meant, because that's when I've talked to people about him. It's like, okay, so he's not going to burn you. He's not got incredible leaps, but he gets open and he makes catches, and that's what is important. And it's not like his size is all that bad. We'll see how he works his way. I think they got a pretty good steal there. We'll see how that works out because there's so many questions now that John Mechie is going to miss, you know, the summer here, working into training camp. What are
Yeah.
the expectations for him? There are no expectations for him
Expectation
given what
is,
he's
I've
had.
always
So
said,
just get on the
just
field,
touch
right?
your
So
toes, success. If you're out there stretching, success.
right. He's on a different curve than other people at this point. So the Xavier, the Hutchinsons of this group are more important because of that, and that's just something they've had to deal with even last year with Pep Hamilton. Like with talking about play calling and all that. I mean, you lost a second round wide receiver throughout that too. So I mean, that's just what they're dealing with here. So there's Hutchinson could find a way onto the field pretty quickly.
All right. So what else do we got? What other Brooks K takeaways do we got? You can read these at the Chronicle. Y'all all need to subscribe, like to this, and y'all need to get that Chronicle subscription. The Brooks Kubena, Jonathan Alexander stuff is worth it by itself for
Yeah,
sure.
HoustonChronicle.com. I mean, should I sit here until I get at least 3 people? You know what?
Don't
You see,
even do this.
there was a time on Twitter where I actually donated 25 cents to people
Yeah.
to go ahead and do it. I've got all this change, man. So maybe I need to pull that out.
You got the change sitting out there?
A little jar here. The long snapper was looking great, Patrick.
John
So
Weeks, right? Not the
John
new one.
Weeks,
Okay. Just
the
making
guy
sure.
that keeps coming back on 1-year deals. I mean, you just need to sign him to a lifetime contract.
Friend
on
of the
this
show,
guy.
man.
Why are you
Friend of the
jerking him
show.
around?
Been in
Come
the life.
on.
My guy. My boy. Johnny Weeks.
So CJ Stroud, I'll go back to it here. One of the things that I was looking forward to was just his transition to this offense, obviously going under center. The thing about him is timing. Uh, Bobby Sloak talked about precision, rhythm, all of that. Those are the important things with him. And when he did run with some of the ones in just offensive warm-ups before they did any of the 7-on-7, 11-on-11s and things like that, and just dropping back from under center, his timing was a little off. He overshot Robert Woods on a crosser during that. He had a play action that was a little bit wobbly, but got it to Tank Dell and for about 20 yards. He did a rollout to the sideline and tucked it and ran. Those are the things that I was looking at. His ball placement is there, but you can see him where the spots are that he needs to continue to grow there. So that was my takeaway for him. The other thing too is that Juice Scruggs is working with him. Scott Quessenberry, another guy that could be a cap casualty later on, that could save some there. Scruggs and Stroud, it's weird. I'm going to do some research to find out when the last time a team started a rookie quarterback and a center week one. That's possible, but they work the most together with the teams after Davis Mills and such. So those were some things there. Another situation that I was kind of keeping track of was the linebacker deal. It seems like Kirksey's still the mic. Christian Harris has always been considered a rangy outside linebacker, even under Lovie Smith. I expect he'd do that again. But where does Corey Littleton figure into the mix? I mean, if they're running a base 4-3, it's probably going to be on the outside. I don't know how often they're going to do that. We saw them run slot about 60% of the time. The 49ers did that less. You're not going to see that much until probably training camp. So that's something to be identifying there. So there are other things.
The rookie center, you're trying to see how the rookie center and the quarterback when that's happened.
Yeah. You got it?
I do not.
Oh, okay.
I thought I looked up, but it was a year off, so it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to.
So like I mean, I can see some of the comments here, and I just have a little Excel sheet that I've kind of had up. There are a lot of people. Let's see, how many players? There are 41 players who are entering the final year of their contract right now, and there are 9 players that the Texans could save $2.4 million or more by cutting. Kirksey's the most at 5.2. Steven Nelson's at 3.8. Jerry Hughes is at 3.5. Desmond King's at 3. These are players that are in competitive spots. You mentioned Nelson and Shaquille Griffin. I mean, Griffin's shown that he can play at other spots too. So if those win out, you can see how the Texans might move and make themselves more flexible by moving on from some of these players. Scott Questenberry, he's at $2.4 million if they release him. So those are spots that you're wondering about. Even Jerry Hughes at 35. I mean, he's been productive. I don't expect that he'd be someone that you'd give up just because, you could save some cash on the guy. But those are the kinds of decisions that we'll start seeing more towards training camp. And then how active is Nick Caserio going to be then to start spending some money during the season with players that are entering the final year of their deals? I mean, I'm just bringing up
talking in-season extensions.
In-season extensions. Tytus Howard, is he going to get one? Is he going to be someone they wait towards the end of the year? Is he going to wait till the end of the year? Is it possible that they would want to franchise tag him with their wealth of cap space to get at least one more year out of it and draft an offensive tackle and work their way into it? That's a whole separate discussion. I mean, it's worth saying, Kaimi Fairbairn's entering the final year of his contract. I think he'd be the one that gets the in-season extension, him and Cam Johnston too. Those are the two that would get it because they've done nothing but succeed the last couple of years, and those are pretty easy deals you can make.
Okay, so you're pushing for the kicker and the punter to get the in-season extensions. I like
Yeah.
it. I like where special teams matter too. Special teams matter too.
Yeah, Kaimi went through, and maybe I don't know, there weren't that many pressure kicks last year, but he had a career high 91% field goal percentage. He kicked a 61-yarder a couple years ago. Those are, once the Texans start making the playoffs, you're going to need somebody to make some of these kicks. So you got to lock him into a 10-year extension just to make sure he can play in a playoff game. So I don't know. I say those guys because I think those are the ones I'll project as the people who would probably get it first. And I don't think Tytus Howard would probably get it in season.
Yeah, I could see Tytus Howard being one of the guys they let go. I don't. How much are you going to invest in the O-line when you got other stuff to work? Like at some point, you're going to let good players go.
They're already investing the most they ever have in the offensive line, and they're ranked first in positional spending. And I did a story right after the Shaq Mason extension to look into the history of that since the last 10 years. And it's one of those where you go into a data set and you're like, hopefully it'll show it. But then you realize, oh, wait, the NFL is $1 billion business with a bunch of analysts, and they definitely have an Excel sheet. And they're not the idiots that didn't think of this, Brooks. So you think you found a trend that they didn't. And no, there's not a trend by how much you spend on any given position. That then leads into all the other, evaluations in the middle of a person's career and how much. Basically, it's like who's good on your team and who do you expect to be good still. And if they see good things from Tytus Howard and they expect him to be good in the future and they can afford it, why not? In my opinion, unless you have another spot that you want to pay for, like look at the wide receivers right now. Which of them are you going to offer an extension? Which are you, like, what rookies from the last couple of years are you going to be sitting into the last right now? Like, you're not going to be entering contract extension talks with Derek Stingley for another couple of years.
No,
like, you're going to have time. So Tytus Howard really right now is the one veteran that is entering this kind of discussion, because the other guys that you're talking about are like Jonathan Grenard, who's entering his final year of his contract, and who knows what he might have been if he'd been healthy. Maybe he'll have that this year, but those are the kind of guys you'd be entering contract negotiations with, unless you want to open up and go completely all in and in free agency, which I think you'd be able to do even if you do sign Tytus Howard. So that'll be interesting. Is he going to want, market rate money like Laramie Tunsil? Like, you're not going to pay him the same as him. He hasn't had the same production. So
yeah,
what's his anticipation? Is he going to seek higher spending somewhere else and an opportunity? Like Tytus Howard's, the thing is too, like I was thinking about this too. Who are the incumbents that were here before the Caserio era? Tytus Howard's one of them. 2019 first-round pick. He's seen everything there is to see about the Texans organization.
And
Kaimi Fairbairn.
Weeks Fairbairn. Titus, Tunsil, Weeks, Fairbairn.
Weeks probably knows where the body's buried. He's been around for all he's been around the most.
You would think that, but
you think he just
see,
walk
Weeks is
around?
my boy. Weeks is my boy. That's my boy for real. But he just stays out of trouble, man. Like he does not like he does
snaps the football.
He snaps the football. He loves his teammates, but he just knows how to. Weeks knows how to stay out of trouble, man.
Keeps getting those 1-year extensions.
He deserves it.
He does. He deserves a lifetime contract.
So,
but to finish that thought, it's like Titus Howard's been around this. This is the only team he's ever known. He's been through so many offensive coordinators. Maybe he thinks he can get better money in a position. Like the Chiefs just signed an offensive tackle because they needed one. And that's a good scenario. Titus Howard entering a scenario where, hey, how do I anybody need an offensive tackle? I'm pretty good, and I can get a better contract, and I can enter a situation that's more stable. I don't see that being out of the question for him. So the Texans would then
tackle market's a mofo, man.
Got to make his money, and you then be looking at the Texans realistically and say they just paid Laramie. They made Laramie Tunsil the highest paid tackle in history. I'm not going to get a huge deal like that. Maybe I can get it elsewhere. So
the other thing is if someone looks at the tape of the times that he's played left tackle and says, you know what, we could probably use him as our left tackle.
Yeah.
Just
versatility.
You never know. You mentioned Grenard. You mentioned some of the bodies on the D-line. What do you make of all this Clowney talk that has kind of emerged as a result of Mark Berman's Fox 26 feature?
Well, so Clowney is an interesting conversation because obviously you're looking at guys that can fulfill not just edge rushing, and that's never what Clowney was. He was more the guy that was able to set the edge against the run, and the Texans have been terrible at that the last couple of years. And Hughes and Grenard have been part of that problem. And does Clowney supply you with something better? What kind of deal would Jadeveon Clowney want? You're looking at a situation around. I think the Texans are hovering around $16 million in cap space right now, and they haven't yet signed CJ Stroud or Will Anderson to deals that'll probably pay them $8 million a year. So you'd then be sitting in a scenario where you'd have to make some flexibilities and reconstruct some things, and that'd probably be more of a training camp signing. Would he still be around by then? Is that somebody who would be available in training camp?
Do you think he would fit into what they're doing?
I mean, people fit into winners. People fit into people they believe in. Does he think that with DeMeco? I saw that interview with Berman, and he says he likes what's going on with that coach. It's possible, but this is a scenario where, like, all right, so he went through, he's gone through position changes too, for outside linebacker and defensive end and 3-4, went to 4-3, played with the Seahawks, kind of on the outside edge again, went 4-3, hand in the dirt with the Browns. He know what they're trying to do. Like this situation, like if it's more of a leverage point, I think, with the Browns to go back with the team that might have a better situation for them. But the Texans, they just added Jacob Martin. You have Jerry Hughes, Jonathan
He got
Grenard.
a hype video today.
Well, you're adding another player to a mix where you have to make decisions. And you may enter the summer with if they don't answer some of the questions about what they have, and those guys, it wouldn't be out of the question, but it would just be how much money is he looking to have, and does he fit into what the Texans have in their space available?
All right, I'm going to get you out of here on this. It's early. What are the biggest differences at this point covering DeMeco compared to Culley and Levy Smith?
Biggest difference.
Whether there's like something different in practice, whether it's a different way they handle media, whether it's a different way they talk to you, whether it's just the overall feel from the fans, which is obvious, I think. What are the biggest differences early on?
Well, it's just in the context of things. DeMeco Ryans was a highly sought after candidate. So we've talked about that, and David Culley and Lovie Smith, they were part of a rebuild with the Texans, and this was someone that was, for that, like DeMeco Ryans, what he's in the scenario he's at, he's talking about players and picks and free agency signings those coaches never had. So we're entering only the first time of seeing these practices. So like I'm kind of tempering my own expectations from what the differences we see from DeMeco. We're not going to really know that until we see them play, because I mean, what am I going to take away the defensive his defensive influence on these guys from watching Christian Harris run around in OTAs? Like, I don't think that's fair to DeMeco or any kind of comparisons, but just in how he handles himself in interviews and such, like you can tell that he tempers expectations more than he accelerates them. He, he's not bent on talking about the positives of a team. You know, they're talking about competition, they're talking about expectations, but he seems to really be pushing towards proving it right now and not setting things for expectations in the future. So that's his own style. Everyone has their own, but the indication of whether he's a success is going to be wins. It's going to be like for as much as Bill O'Brien was as a GM and maybe a little bit difficult with the media. They won all the AFC South titles too. So like, I'm not going to say like, oh, DeMeco Ryans and how he handles the media too is going to indicate their success. So, I mean, there's still a lot of questions from him. We don't even know if he's going to call defensive plays yet. I've kind of held off on that because, you know, that was kind of a joke between at the league meetings. Like, you didn't ask me this time, but you know, we got to know these things. We got to see how he designs a defense, how he works with all these. He's young. He's into this 38 years old. We'll see how this works out. I don't have all that many takeaways from him. He looks like an NFL coach, and he's acting like one right now.
All right. HoustonChronicle.com. Go there, subscribe, support the local coverage. How much is it right now? You said 50 cents?
25 cents.
25 cents for 6 months. Y'all can do that.
Look,
y'all can do that. 25 cents for 6 months. That's a steal.
I'm trying not to get in trouble about this either because I need to get paid. Everybody in journalism needs to get paid. I think it's worth at least $8 a month. I think it's worth.
Yeah, I think it's up to 10.
I think it's worth
it's local coverage, man.
You get me.
Features.
You get Jonathan. You get Jonathan Fagan, who I think doesn't get enough credit in the city for what he's doing. He's been around the Rockets for 30 years covering them, and he's an excellent writer, excellent reporter. Astros coverage. Local news, all that stuff. Like 25 cents for 6 months is nothing.
Get the digital,
give it a shot.
All that.
Like I'm sitting here trying to talk about journalism and like what matters and all that stuff. And I mean, gosh,
it does matter. Journalism is very important. Local stuff's very important.
What does it behoove me to have to convince you guys that 25 cents?
You need to get a shirt that says "I broke the DeMeco story." That's what you need. That's what you need. I broke the DeMeco story, and your stuff would go up. You don't brag about that enough.
I don't think people care.
Yeah, they should. This guy broke the damn DeMeco story. Give him 25 cents for breaking the most important story in town. HoustonChronicle.com. Subscribe. 6 months. Boom. Yeah. Bada bing, bada boom. I feel like I'm on one of those old infomercials back in the day. Brooks.
Look, and I'll say too, just if I'm gonna promote myself,
you got to.
There are national awards. There's something called the APSEs, which is something from sports editors. There's the highest ranking. That's ESPN, Sports Illustrated, New York Times, all those cats. Top 10, I was in them. So I was top 10 beat reporter out of everyone in the nation. And then also in short feature. And the Houston Chronicle had a lot of that too across the board. So
boom,
we're giving you some of the best coverage in the country.
Top 10.
25 cents.
Top 10.
How is that possible? But it is. Go do it.
All right, man. Appreciate you, Brooks. As always, always the best insight. You're the man, dude. Much love. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep traveling the world. Be fresh whenever the next OTA is, and then training camp comes around. We'll be just sprinting, man. Less questions, more answers.
In June, I'm going to Scandinavia, and then in July, Italy. So I'm going to come back. I'm going to
come back fat.
I'm going to be chill.
I'm gonna have a going to Italy. You're going to Scandinavia and Italy. Yeah, Italy. You're gonna come back.
What body transformation will Brooks have by training camp?
You're gonna have a different look than Kenyon Green.
the opposite. I'm gonna go find that same car dealer and take a picture with him just to do a little comp, just to see what's going on.
Need to see what's up. Appreciate you, man.
Of course, man. Anytime. I love doing this.
All right. That's the great Brooks Kubena, the really great Brooks Kubena. HoustonChronicle.com. We're lucky to have the guy. Seriously. He does his thing, and we're very, very fortunate to have him. And I'm very happy for him that he is getting to cover a decent football team, because my God, that's got to suck. There are two jobs in journalism that I feel the worst for, and it's baseball beat writers on crappy baseball teams, and just this Texans the last couple of years. But go ahead and subscribe. Appreciate everyone for coming through.
We got taste for days.
We're all in this together.
Takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number one. You don't need to try your luck.